Hey guys, tonight we're tracing the wild, wine-soaked footsteps of a god who doesn't fit the mold. There are no mighty thunderbolts or heroic labors here, just vine leaves, disguises, and a lot of very confused humans. You're not standing atop Olympus with golden armor. Instead, you find yourself in the shadowy corner of an ancient marketplace, the scent of overripe grapes and wood smoke in the air, and someone is whispering a name you don't recognize yet. Dionysus, a god of theater, madness, and wine, maybe the only one who'd rather hand you a goblet than a sword. But don't let the soft lighting fool you. This story starts with flames, jealousy, and a baby nobody expected to survive. You probably won't survive it either, not without a few reality checks. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I always love seeing how far this sleepy little time machine travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts oddly enough with a scandal. You're not even sure who's in the wrong. Zeus, the eternal flirt with a bad record of fidelity, or Semele, a mortal princess with big dreams and even bigger problems. They meet. Do what people tend to do in myths. And then she's pregnant with a child who isn't just mortal, but divine. And that never ends well. You walk into Thebes, down dusty city streets humming with gossip. Everyone's whispering about Semele. Poor girl, they say, cursed by her beauty, doomed by ambition. And in the smoky back room of a temple, Hera, Zeus's wife, is stewing. Hera, who specializes in revenge, served hotter than the surface of the sun, hatches a quiet little plot. She appears to Semele disguised as an old woman. You watch half horrified as she gently plants the seed of doubt. Are you sure he's really Zeus? Don't gods appear in their full glory to those they love? You already know where this is going. Semele, confused and now craving proof, demands that Zeus show himself in his divine form. He begs her not to make him, but she insists. You hear thunder before you see it. Then, white-hot, searing light, Zeus reveals himself. Flames race along the chamber walls. Semele burns. And here's the bit the myths skip over with surprising brevity. She dies. Yes, but she's pregnant. The baby, 6 months along, is somehow still alive. Zeus doesn't panic. He improvises. This is where things get weird. You're standing in a high chamber in Olympus now, where Zeus slices open his own thigh, casually, like he's making a sandwich, and sews the unborn baby inside. You don't ask about the details. There's divine stitching involved. Ambrosia, maybe. Either way, Dionysus finishes gestating inside his father's leg. Just imagine that baby shower. Then, birth or rebirth, depending on how you count. Dionysus arrives into the world amid incense, thunder, and extremely confused gods. His mother is gone. His father's knee is probably sore. But the baby is alive, and he will never quite fit anywhere. Some versions say he's immediately spirited away to be raised in secret to protect him from Hera's wrath. Others claim he's turned into a goat or hidden in a cave guarded by nymphs. One tale suggests Hermes, ever the fixer, delivers him to the care of mountain spirits who raise him on honey and dreams. Historians still argue whether these conflicting stories were layered by poets for flair or simply regional fan edits. But wherever you are, you cradle the child god gently in your arms. He's wrapped in ivy leaves and already smells faintly of wine. You walk uphill into a forest thick with birdsong and sap. It is safe here, for now. The world forgets him for a time. Then, slowly, the god begins to stir. First, it's in the sap that runs richer in the spring. Then, in the bark that peels with fragrant tang. Then, the vines twist a little closer to human homes. He's not just alive, he's growing. You rest beside a stream as dusk falls. Somewhere a flute plays. It's uneven, amateurish. You think maybe a nymph is learning. But when you look, there's no one there, just wind and mist. That's how he begins. You wake up to the sound of bleating goats and the scent of something sour-sweet in the air. Not quite wine, not quite vinegar, something in between. Dionysus, still young, is toddling barefoot through wild vines and berry brambles. The god of wine is learning to walk, and the world is already starting to ferment around him. The forest clears to reveal a hillside dotted with wicker pens and tiny wooden shrines. Women in saffron robes sing as they crush grapes with their feet. You follow Dionysus past baskets full of goat cheese and clusters of grapes so ripe they burst in your fingers. This is not Olympus. This is somewhere much more grounded, closer to the dirt and the heartbeat of the earth. Oats follow him. Always goats. It's said the word tragedy itself may come from tragoedia, the song of the goat. No one can quite agree whether it refers to goat skins worn in ritual, goat prizes handed to the best performer, or the bleating songs sung at wine festivals. Historians still argue whether the goat was meant to be honored or just eaten after the show, but the connection sticks. Dionysus becomes the god of goats, grapes, and giddy improvisation. You crouch beside a rudimentary altar as an old man splashes wine onto the stones, muttering half-remembered hymns. Dionysus watches him, head tilted, then mimics the motion, pouring juice from his cupped hands like an offering. He giggles. The old man doesn't see the joke, but you do. Elsewhere, people have started noticing odd things. Vines sprout up overnight through cracks in the clay. Honey drips from tree trunks. A woman dreams of ivy, then wakes to find it wrapped around her doorway. Something is stirring, and it wears a child's face. Still, Hera remembers. One night, you're sleeping in a hill cave, cradled by moss and the low snore of a dryad. When the dream turns dark, Hera sends madness, slithering, invisible, patient. It wraps itself around the mind of young Dionysus like smoke in a bottle. When he wakes, he doesn't know his name. You follow him down the mountain, past shepherds who stare too long and forget why they're angry, down into valleys where fruit ferments before it ripens. He is wandering now, unknowable and strange. Some versions say he becomes a girl. Others say he hides among mortals, growing older, weirder, more powerful each time someone mistakes him for something else. You join a band of women carrying jars on their heads. They don't ask where you came from. They laugh too loudly. Their eyes gleam with something wild. Dionysus walks among them, smiling now, half mad but free. They are called maenads, raving ones. But right now, they're more like pranksters. They smear berries on each other's cheeks, whisper strange riddles, and teach you how to dye cloth with crushed pomegranate skin. You learn to weave ivy into your hair and make flutes out of bone. At night, they dance around a fire that smells of fennel and goat fat. The stars blur above you. Dionysus claps offbeat, and you laugh until you cry, unsure why. Later, someone gifts you a goat skin to wear, coarse and heavy, but oddly comforting. It's soaked in something pungent. You don't ask what. Over time, the rituals grow louder, the laughter a little more unhinged. The line between joy and frenzy thins. Today, it's still gentle. You hike barefoot through olive groves, following Dionysus to the edge of a small town. He points, and a vine creeps up from the soil, curling into a perfect spiral. A giggle escapes him. It is, somehow, a declaration of intent. By now, you've crossed borders without knowing it. Dionysus doesn't care for maps. He drifts like mist between cities, skipping from mountaintop to valley, from grove to harbor. And wherever he goes, he brings the same thing. Change. Not thunderbolt revolution, but something slower, stranger. A grapevine curling around an old law. A song creeping into a market where no one remembers how to dance. You arrive in Phrygia, or maybe Lydia. The names shift. The air is heavy with spice and wood smoke. Foreign perfumes tangle with animal musk. Dionysus wanders into the court of an old king, Midas. You probably know the guy, the gold thing, but that part comes later. Right now, Midas is hosting a feast, and the wine has run suspiciously thin. Dionysus notices. He lifts a finger, and suddenly the amphorae bubble over with thick, fragrant vintage. It tastes like figs and cinnamon. Everyone claps. Midas smiles, and just like that, Dionysus is honored as a guest, maybe even a minor celebrity. But Dionysus doesn't stay still long. He prefers company that doesn't ask questions. You follow him out past the city walls, into a festival already halfway started. Drums pound softly, like distant thunder. Women, older than they look, lead dances in looping, trance-like spirals. Their hair is unbound. Their feet are caked in dust and wine. Here the rites begin. You're handed a thyrsus, a fennel stalk tipped with ivy and pine cones. It's supposed to be symbolic, but you're not entirely sure of what. Power? Pleasure? A really weird salad? The music builds. The circle spins. The god dances with you, and everything goes soft at the edges. Then it gets louder. The maenads begin to chant. You see others join them. Men with wild eyes and squaggly beards, dressed in animal skins. The Bacchae, Dionysus followers. They don't look dangerous exactly, just very enthusiastic. You catch sight of Dionysus, laughing with a satyr, short, scruffy, hooves where feet should be, always in need of a nap or a drink. He tries to flirt with a tree. The tree doesn't respond. Historians still argue whether these rituals were liberating or terrifying, whether they gave voice to suppressed joy or just unhinged chaos. You suspect both. Suddenly, Dionysus looks at you. He tilts his head, raises one brow, and then, without speaking, beckons you deeper into the grove, past the torchlight, into the dark. You go. The trees close in. A hush falls over everything. You're not afraid exactly, but the air changes. Cooler, denser, smelling faintly of crushed mint and something older. You step on what you think is moss, but it squishes. Fermented fruit, maybe, or something left as an offering. Then you see it, a low, natural amphitheater carved into the hillside, empty but waiting. The moonlight pools like water across stone benches. Dionysus walks to the center and sits. He says nothing. You realize slowly that this is the seed, the moment that theater begins, not with applause or curtain calls, but with silence, with one person watching another, with a god sitting on a stage doing absolutely nothing. You sit too. Minutes pass, or maybe hours, and then he smiles, whispers one word: imagine. It echoes in your chest. You're still sitting in the hush of that grove-turned-stage when the world begins to shift again. Not dramatically. No thunderclap, no divine light show. Just a growing warmth in the earth beneath you and a new scent on the breeze. Beeswax, sweat, and sandalwood. Somewhere nearby, someone is building something. You rise to follow Dionysus, who now walks with purpose. He's older, or younger. It's hard to tell. His face changes depending on the shadows, but his steps are steady now, and his eyes sparkle with a private joke. Ahead lies a small city-state hugging the coast. The sun glints off painted walls, and every alley is busy with noise. Chatter, barter, arguments over olive oil quality. And right in the middle of it all, nestled between a bathhouse and a bakery, you see it, a half-finished stage. Wooden planks, simple benches, no curtains, no lighting tricks. Just a slightly raised circle and a row of masks laid out like sleeping faces. You sit in the dust and watch as craftsmen hammer in rhythm. Dionysus leans against a column, nodding to the beat. This, he tells you without speaking, is where it all comes together. The masks catch your eye. Big expressions, grinning, weeping, leering. They look a little ridiculous, like the faces of your uncles after too much mead, but there's something oddly human about them too. Something ancient. A woman picks one up and tries it on. The instant she does, she changes. Posture, voice, even the way she breathes. She struts across the stage, delivers a line you don't understand, and suddenly the small crowd is clapping. You find yourself clapping too. This is early theater, sure, but it's also magic, a ritual wrapped in pretend, a place where lies are true and truth wears a funny face. Dionysus laughs, the woman bows, someone throws figs. You learn that this city, Thasos, or maybe Thebes, the names keep changing, holds a city Dionysia, a festival in the god's honor. It's part sacred rite, part frat party, part drama contest, and it gets rowdy. You peek into the tent where actors prep for the evening show. One man, already drunk, is practicing lines with his tunic on backward. A boy is nervously adjusting a beard that's clearly made of goat hair. The playwright paces in circles, muttering curses at the wind. Dionysus loves it. He flits from group to group, like a patron who doesn't pay the tab, but still gets the best seat. He encourages the worst jokes, the loudest songs, the sloppiest improvisations. Somehow, it all works. Then, just before dusk, a hush falls again. The crowd gathers. You squeeze in with the locals, passing wineskins and fig cakes. The actors emerge, masked and robed. One holds a wooden staff that marks him as the chorus leader. Another wears a painted crown, absurdly too big. They begin. It's a comedy, apparently. At least, people are laughing. It involves a donkey, a lost sandal, and a minor god with a very squeaky voice. None of it makes sense to you, but it doesn't matter. The rhythm catches you, the chant of the chorus. The slapstick tumbles. The moment when one actor turns to the sky and delivers a line so earnest, the crowd goes still. And in that silence, you look over. Dionysus is gone. Or, no, he's there. In every laugh, in the warm flush of wine, in the shared breath of hundreds, watching the same absurd scene unfold. He didn't invent theater like you invent a chair or a comb. He became it, or maybe it became him. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was truly a god of drama from the beginning, or whether the Greeks simply needed someone to blame for all that noise. Either way, the mask stuck, the plays grew, and the idea of watching yourself became sacred. The show ends with a pratfall and a pie made of grapes. Applause like thunder. Someone nearby yells, "More wine." And someone else responds by immediately vomiting into a bush. You smile. Dionysus would approve. As you walk home, the moon is rising. A lone flute plays in the dark. The scent of crushed time drifts through the streets. You can still hear the laughter echoing behind you, long after it should have faded. Morning comes, but it doesn't feel like an end. More like intermission. The streets are littered with grape skins, broken sandals, and the occasional bronze goblet someone definitely wasn't supposed to steal. Chickens strut over abandoned props. A child chases a donkey, still wearing its costume from the play. Somewhere, a very tired satyr is curled up beneath a market stall, snoring gently into a pile of onions. You walk on, your head still humming with the echoes of the chorus and the scent of last night's wine. Dionysus is already ahead, perched lazily on a crumbling wall, nibbling a fig and watching you with the satisfied look of a god who just made something people didn't even realize they needed. And yet, he's restless. Theater is good. It's fun, it's divine, but Dionysus wants more. He always does. He craves the thing behind the mask, the wildness beneath the poetry, and so, without much fanfare, he begins to gather a new kind of following. Not playwrights, not actors, but wanderers. You find yourself among them. They are a strange, scrappy bunch. Potters, fishermen, runaway brides, former soldiers with more scars than teeth, all of them drawn by rumor and rhythm. They travel with Dionysus through backroads and mountain passes, carrying nothing but instruments, flasks, and the occasional stolen chicken. Their rituals are louder now, not polished performances, but ecstatic outbursts, dancing in the woods until their feet bleed, singing songs no one taught them, inventing stories that begin and end with laughter. One evening by firelight, someone tells a tale about Dionysus being born twice, once from his mortal mother, once from Zeus's thigh. Wait, you say, his thigh? They nod solemnly. He sewed the baby into it. You stare into the fire and try to process that. Someone else chimes in, and he turned pirates into dolphins once. Now everyone's just making things up, you think. Except they're not. Not exactly. The myths about Dionysus don't follow a neat line. They're not cautionary tales or moral parables. They're wild vines, tangled and contradictory. One version says he invented wine in India. Another claims he was raised by nymphs in a cave near Naxos. One poet swears he descended into the underworld to rescue his mother. Another says he is death in a funny hat. Historians still argue whether these stories evolved as metaphor or cult memory, or if they were just what happened when people drank too much and tried to explain the weather. Either way, you begin to understand. The stories themselves are theater. Ever-changing, reperformed, passed from voice to voice, like a jug of wine at a feast. Dionysus doesn't just inspire performance, he is performance. The act of telling, of becoming, of pretending something into truth. You walk beside him now, through olive groves dappled with light. The branches hang low with fruit. A breeze rustles the leaves, and somewhere in the distance a shepherd sings off-key. Dionysus is quiet for a moment. Then he grins and asks, "Want to see something fun?" The answer is always yes. He leads you to a hilltop where the sun hangs heavy over the horizon. At the crest, a simple stage, barely more than a stone platform, is surrounded by villagers sitting on blankets. There are no masks this time, no costumes, just a young woman stepping forward, her voice trembling slightly. She begins to tell a story, not about gods or monsters, but about her grandmother's donkey getting stuck in a well. Everyone listens, everyone laughs. Theater again. Not grand, not formal, but true. And behind it all, the same current, the same god, the same old wildness wrapped in a new name. As the villagers clap and pass around olives and honey cakes, Dionysus leans toward you and whispers, "It's not about the script, it's about the space." You nod, pretending you understand. Later, maybe you will. You're lying on a woven mat beneath a fig tree, sticky with juice and half listening to the lazy hum of bees, when Dionysus starts walking again. No warning, no time to go. Just a wink, a stretch, and off he wanders. Barefoot as usual, hair full of leaves, looking for the next bit of chaos to cheer him up. You scramble after him, sandals flapping. The landscape changes slowly. The olive trees thin out. The roads grow dustier. You pass shepherds who eye you warily and small shrines with fading paint. They sing in voices too high for comfort and too low for reason. One smears ash on her cheeks. Another howls at the moon. This is not theater. This is transformation. And you, still clutching your travel pack and trying not to look too awkward, are suddenly handed a tambourine. You bang it once. The sound rattles through you. Your heartbeat sinks with the rhythm. Your worries about where you'll sleep, what this means, whether you remembered to eat, fall away like leaves in wind. Dionysus doesn't just want you to watch anymore. He wants you to join. You do. Your limbs loosen. Your voice rises. You chant nonsense syllables until they start to feel like ancient truths. The night passes in a blur of firelight and sweat and the scent of crushed time. You may or may not have kissed a statue. In the morning, you wake up in the grass, barefoot, your feet stained purple. And Dionysus is sitting nearby, calmly sipping from a cup and watching a beetle climb a blade of grass. He looks perfectly at ease, as if he didn't just oversee a full-blown possession ritual with a soundtrack of flutes and unhinged laughter. He turns to you and says, "Wasn't that better than a scroll?" You don't argue. Still, you're curious. Where did this other version of him come from? The wine and theater Dionysus feels different from this wild forest god wrapped in madness and ivy. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was originally a foreign deity, maybe from Thrace, maybe from Phrygia, who was later imported into the Greek pantheon and sanded down for Athenian tastes. Some claim he was a god of vegetation first, his cult centered on seasonal death and rebirth. Others think he began as a fertility spirit, only later evolving into a patron of drama, intoxication, and joyful chaos. Only realize how carefully this has all been arranged. Every angle, every echo, calculated to draw people in. But the strangest part, this whole setup used to be sacred. You think back to the early days, when performances weren't just entertainment, they were ritual. They began with a procession, a statue of Dionysus, carried from his temple to the theater. People singing, dancing, offering wine. The first plays were essentially acts of devotion. And now, look around. Vendors shout over one another, selling olives and dates. A group of boys practice their tragic monologues behind a pillar, one of them clearly faking a limp. A goat trots casually across the stage area, oblivious to its symbolic relevance. It's chaos, but somehow also perfect. Dionysus sits on a carved seat in the front row. Yes, he gets a real seat, of course, watching with an expression somewhere between smug and sleepy. You sit behind him, still sweaty from climbing the hill, and listen as the first play begins. A tragedy, naturally. The actors wear towering masks, their voices booming and strange. The plot is grim, full of betrayal, curses, and at least 3 people who absolutely should have communicated better. Still, it works. The audience leans in. The chorus sways in rhythm. The sunlight glints off someone's wine cup. And somehow, despite the scale, it feels intimate. You think, this is the closest thing ancient Greeks have to therapy. You are not wrong. Historians still argue whether Greek drama functioned as social commentary or emotional release, or maybe both. Aristotle later called it catharsis, the purging of pity and fear. Tragedy lets people feel things too big for everyday life. It's a safe space for chaos, wrapped in rhythm and rhyme. And Dionysus, he invented that. You glance at him, he's grinning. The mask of a tragic hero lies beside him on the stone seat, as if discarded mid-thought. You lean back and let the story take over. When the tragedy ends, no one claps. That comes later. First, a silence, soft and deep, as if the gods themselves are exhaling. Then applause, loud, joyful, cathartic. Afterward, as people file out toward food stalls and gossip, Dionysus remains seated. He looks thoughtful, maybe even proud. You wonder how he feels, watching mortals turn pain into poetry. He answers without looking at politics, philosophers, bodily functions. The chorus wears bird costumes. At one point, a man disguised as a sausage seller gives a passionate speech about democracy. You're not entirely sure what's happening, but you're laughing anyway. Even the gods get roasted. Dionysus himself is a frequent target in these comedies, often portrayed as cowardly, drunk, or fabulously lazy. And here he is now, sitting 2 rows ahead of you, belly laughing so hard he spills his wine. You can't tell if he's offended or delighted, maybe both. That's the thing about Dionysus. He doesn't need reverence. He prefers irreverence. He wants you to take life seriously enough, but never too seriously. Laughter is sacred to him. So is mischief. So is contradiction. Historians still debate whether the god's portrayal in comedy was meant to mock or to honor him. Some think the Greeks were poking fun at Dionysus to keep him from becoming too powerful, too distant. Others argue that by making him laughable, they made him relatable, a divine friend who doesn't mind a dirty joke. The play ends with a fart joke so elaborate it nearly starts a fire. The audience is howling. A man behind you wipes tears from his eyes and says, "Brilliant. Even better than last year's frogs." You nod like you know what that means. Later, you'll learn that The Frogs is one of Aristophanes' most famous comedies. And yes, Dionysus is absolutely the star. As the crowd spills into the streets, someone hands you a pastry stuffed with cheese and honey. It burns your fingers and your tongue, but it's perfect. A group of flute players is already starting an impromptu dance in the square, and somewhere, a man in a toga is trying to convince a goat to waltz. You sit beside Dionysus, and for a moment, there's peace. Not quiet, of course, not here. But peace in the noise, in the laughter, in the shared joy of people losing themselves in absurdity and rhyme. He leans toward you and says, "You see now, it's not about wine. It's not even about theater." You raise an eyebrow. "It's about permission," he whispers. Permission to feel too much, to laugh too loud, to cry over stories and eat too much cheese and forget yourself. If only for a little while. Dionysus is not the god of loss of control, but the god who gives you permission to release it. That's why the theater is sacred. Not because it teaches lessons, but because it gives you the freedom not to. You walk home with sticky fingers and a head full of fragments, masks and goat songs and sausage sellers and grief that turned into poetry. It's messy. It doesn't all fit neatly in your thoughts, but somehow you sleep better. Dionysus vanishes sometime after midnight, leaving behind an empty cup and a faint smell of cinnamon. The next morning, you'll swear you dreamed him, and maybe you did. Morning in Athens doesn't arrive with gentle light. It arrives with a clatter. Carts rumble over cobblestones. Chickens announce themselves from rooftops. Someone's already arguing over olives 2 stalls away. You blink against the sun and wonder how your head can be both heavy and full of feathers. Dionysus is gone, predictably, but his presence lingers, in your muscles, in the dust on your sandals, in the faint headache that might still be wine or might just be thoughts. You head toward the sanctuary of Dionysus, tucked along the southern slope of the Acropolis. It's not far from the theater, and though much less crowded this morning, it hums with the quiet thrum of ritual. You pass rows of ivy vines climbing up the marble, curling around statues like fingers. There's a priest sweeping the steps. He nods at you as if you've been expected. Inside the sanctuary, it's cooler. The air smells of pressed grapes, of old incense and sun-warmed stone. The statue of Dionysus looms above the altar, bearded, relaxed, crowned with vines, holding the drinking cup like a lazy king. But today, something's different. Laid out on the altar is a curious offering. Not wine or fruit or flowers, but scrolls. Dozens of them, some sealed, some open, ink smudged by fingers and time. Scripts, you realize. Theater scripts. Tragedies, comedies. Satyr plays. You walk among them slowly, touching their edges, reading snatches aloud. Quote, Orestes, haunted by furies. Quote, the chorus of wasps enters, buzzing and complaining. Quote, she bore the child of Zeus and perished in flame. Each scroll is a fragment of someone's devotion, an offering of words rather than gold. Could be your own voice, fading into dream. You wake later, maybe hours, maybe minutes, startled not by noise, but by quiet. The sanctuary has emptied. Outside, the sun has shifted, the shadows grown longer and softer. Somewhere, someone's singing a half-remembered hymn in a language you don't quite recognize but understand anyway. You rise slowly, joints cracking in protest. Dionysus might be the god of youth, but apparently he doesn't grant you any. You decide to wander. Athens spills in every direction like an overturned amphora. Temples, gardens, agoras, fountains burbling beside cracked statues. You take a route away from the main streets, following the scent of wild thyme and something sweeter. You pass a mural of Dionysus painted on a tavern wall. He's dancing with a bear, both of them sloshing wine. Across from it, a wine merchant is shouting about his vintage, claiming it's been kissed by the god himself. You believe him. You drift into a shaded grove just beyond the city. Vines twist around cypress trees. The ground is soft with pine needles. Here, Dionysus isn't marble or theater. He's presence. The air buzzes with possibility. And then, movement. A woman steps into view. She's barefoot, dressed in saffron linen, her hair tangled with ivy into the grain. You're not surprised. Dionysus tends to keep strange company. The maenads, they're called, his wild women. Not evil, not mad. Just free. More free than most people can handle. They dance in moonlight and tear conventions to shreds. They frighten men and frighten ideas. They refuse stillness, boundaries, or logic. They are what happens when emotion outruns reason. And that, too, is divine. Some stories call them dangerous. Others call them wise. Historians still argue whether maenads were real priestesses, symbolic inventions, or exaggerated metaphors for female rebellion. But here in this grove, under this swaying canopy, you feel their truth more than you can explain it. Another fig falls from a tree. You eat it slowly, the juice running down your wrist. Sweet and strange, and slightly fermented. Everywhere you look, the world feels soft, tilted, a little unreal. You blink and see a satyr leaning against a tree, watching you with mild amusement. He scratches behind one horn, yawns, and vanishes like smoke. You don't chase him. You don't need to. Why confuse everything? He laughs, low and warm, because people forget. Every day, they forget who they are. They forget their animals. They forget their divine. They forget their temporary. I remind them. You sip again, and the wine hits differently now. It hums in your veins, a warm reminder of everything beautiful and broken in you. Dionysus leans closer, his voice softer. People need order, he says, but they also need release. Too much logic and the world calcifies. Too much restraint and it cracks. I'm the crack. I'm the festival between harvest and planting. I'm the day the masks go on and come off. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was originally a Thracian deity, or imported from the east, or born right here under a fig tree in Thebes. But sitting beside him now, it's clear. He doesn't belong to one place. He belongs to between places, to liminal things. You look at him and ask quietly, "Did you invent theater?" He smiles again. "I invented permission." And with that, he stands. You watch as he walks toward the trees, his figure blending with the darkness, until all that remains is the faint rustle of ivy and the smell of crushed grapes. You stay by the stream a while longer, thinking, feeling, remembering. Then you rise and walk back toward the city. You reach the outskirts of Athens just as the moon lifts fully over the rooftops, casting silver ribbons across the stone-paved roads. Everything is hushed, save for the occasional bray of a donkey or the soft clatter of amphorae being shifted behind shuttered stalls. But something feels different now. You're not just returning to the city, you're returning changed. Like someone who stepped into a painting and came back smeared in its colors. A group of performers passes you in the street. They're still in costume, masks pushed up onto their heads, faces flushed with exertion, and maybe a little leftover wine. One wears the face of a tragic queen, another a grinning fool, watched from the cheap seats. Below, a solitary figure walks the stage, practicing lines by moonlight. Their voice is soft, private. This is rehearsal, not performance. You recognize the cadence of Euripides, whom the gods would destroy. The actor mutters, then stops, shakes their head, and tries again. It's comforting to know even tragedy needs rehearsal. The scent of crushed time rises from the cracks in the stone. You lean back, imagining the sun-baked crowds of the Dionysia festival. Thousands packed into the stands, sunburnt and rowdy, all there to witness actors shout and sing about fate, hubris, and the stubborn foolishness of mortals. And somewhere, probably in the wings or just behind a column, Dionysus would be grinning. Maybe tweaking the script a little. Maybe slipping some insight into the lines that no one notices until it's too late. You remember something else now. How the earliest plays weren't just stories, but sacred rituals. Offerings. Each actor a vessel. Each chorus a voice of the people. Each audience member a participant in a shared unraveling. Theater wasn't entertainment. It was catharsis, a word that literally means to cleanse. You feel that now. Not clean, exactly, but scoured, emptied out in a good way. Like something old and stiff has broken off inside you. It's pretty much the summary. You sit at the edge of a fountain, watching. There's no script, no rehearsals, just the pure instinct of play. And in its own way, it's perfect. It's what the earliest actors must have been like, just people pretending, and somewhere along the way, stumbling into meaning. Historians still debate the origin of the first actors. Thespis is the usual suspect, so much so that actors today are still sometimes called thespians. Supposedly, he stepped out of the chorus one day and spoke as a single character, and in that moment, theater was born. But you wonder if someone else tried it first. Maybe a bored shepherd imitating his flock. Maybe a potter reenacting a scene from the market. Maybe a child, just like these, making her own myths. A gust of warm wind scatters flower petals from a nearby altar. They tumble across the square, catching in hair and cloth and sandals. One lands on your shoulder, a pale violet. The kind sacred to Dionysus. You don't move. In this moment, it feels like something's watching. Not ominous, more curious, like a god leaning in through the curtain, just to see what kind. And as you take your last steps up the amphitheater, you imagine Dionysus watching from somewhere among the olive branches, swirling a cup of dark red wine and smiling, not because you believed every word, but because you listened, because you imagined, because for a few hours you were both actor and audience. And now the play is over. The mask comes off, and all that remains is stillness. Stillness and the soft hum of wind in the trees. Wind down, 300 words. And now, as the curtain falls and the stories dim, you find yourself slipping deeper into the hush between thoughts. The theater fades behind you. The marble warms into memory, and the god, wherever he is, lets you go without a word. The air is gentler now. Your breath slows. The heartbeat of the day is quieting into something slower, more ancient. The kind of rhythm you only notice when the world stops asking things of you. Starlight and satire. And now, as your breath deepens and your body softens, you're exactly where you need to be, held, still, drifting. So sleep, dear listener. The god has gone quiet. The stage is dark, and your dreams are waiting just behind the curtain.